A warm welcome and very good morning to all of you. In fact, it's a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Avik Sinha, Ajay Jindalji, and Dr. Joydeep Nak, as well as Indranil Chaudhary, to this platform. This is a one of the kind which has been organized and advanced by Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, and this being one of the most esteemed avenue for us from Amrita to offer one of the best in class UGC approved online degree programs, which is in alliance with industry as well as academic partners. I, Amrita Lakshmi, chairing the Department of Commerce and Management at Amritapuri, is very esteemed to share with you the details about the Business Administration online degree program, which is going to be launched this year for a group of aspirants who aspires for business administration degrees online. Now, over the years, Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, which is ranked the fourth best private universities by NRF and also included in global rankings, we have advanced the Amrita Ahead Bachelor of Business Administration online degree program, which is focused for innovative business education with the presence of national and international expert faculty with a great span of learning flexibility using the state-of-art technology-enhanced virtual learning environment for learners, academicians, by delivering a superior learning pedagogy for the future career development, administration, and management skill development of the learners. This program is UGC approved, and this academic program consists of a well-structured researched curriculum covering 121 credits of courses that span from management courses, economics, financial management courses, marketing courses, sales courses, logistics, international finance, digital marketing, and very much the industrial relevant courses such as cybersecurity, web-based marketing, entrepreneurship, business and data analytics, marketing information systems, portfolio management, security analysis, project management, microfinance, and whatnot. In fact, this is going to be very equivalent to the on-campus programs. The learners will get the immersive learning experience through live sessions with the faculty, through recorded video lectures from the faculty, through discussion forums where they are free to engage with the faculty experts by clarifying their doubts and enhancing their learning. And also they are able to share and interact with industrial experts, project experts across the country and abroad. We also offer the learners a very well-placed career development programs and placement assistance that in fact maps their skills, career skills, and also grooms their present career skills for future career. The program is set in such a manner that they can choose their own pace from their workplaces, from their homes, and at their own comforts. Some of the basic highlights, major key highlights of the program is that all the courses are industrial relevant courses. It is prior learner-centered, faculty-mentored online degree program. It is experiential based online learning program. There are live sessions, weekly basis, and recorded sessions daily so that the learners can, aspirants can refer in the future. It provides hands-on self-efficacy learning system, a virtual learning system. It provokes and probes the learners and aspirants to think creatively through online tests which are reinforced and designed for the learners. The learning session is also engaging a discussion forum which is emphasizing on higher learning, creative thinking as well. The online degree program also delivers workshops, webinars, projects, project discussions with industrial leaders, project leaders, academicians, and professionals. And in fact, we also keep close industry interactions through project experience with real-time, real-world projects for the learners. So this is in fact the whole platform, the basic idea about the platform of Amrita Ahead Business, Bachelor of Business Administration programs. We also offer BCA program. I welcome Shrikala to initiate the session for BCA program.
Good morning, everyone. We are standing at an arena where the hiring pattern have totally changed, and now the hiring patterns are totally industry 4.0 driven, where jobs are no more generic but very much skill specific. Therefore, it is necessary for any budding technology aspirant to be equipped with the recent technology or technology standards to meet the desirability of the recruiters. So our Amrita University, through the prestigious initiative of Amrita Ahead, actually tries to bridge this gap between the academia and the industry. So, starting with the online BCA program, one of the main USPs or uniqueness of this program is, especially this is designed for the freshers as well as any experienced person who has completed their plus two and then gone for a job can opt for this course, and they can complete this course at their own pace. The flexibility that this course offers is tremendous. Actually, you can take a candidate who has enrolled for this program can take a minimum of 3 years to complete, and a maximum he or she can elapse it to 6 years. So between the time span, if you have got any gaps also, that doesn't mind, you'll be awarded with a regular degree. And another thing is all the programs that is delivered, offered through Amrita Ahead online programs are fully UGC approved, and it is having the same value as that of the in-house programs. Also, yeah, and this degree, this degree actually allows any candidate to opt for any government jobs or non-government jobs, IT sectors, non-IT sectors. So I would like to emphasize it again. This particular degree program, fully online degree program, is equal to any other in-house program delivered in campus. Another thing is, Amrita University have been doing the best in placements for so many years, some 2 decades. And our alumni, the past alumni, they're all placed with prestigious institutions and organizations all around the world in reputed positions as well. So they are also contributing to the career or the placement assistance, and we have a dedicated placement team to support our students, not only technology wise, but also the interpersonal, to enhance the interpersonal skills accordingly what they are giving particular training for what industry demands. So we assure all our students are placed well and have their dream jobs in their hands once they complete the course. So another thing is that the curriculum of this program is very much strategically envisioned by the industry experts as well as the subject matter experts. After so many discussions, brief discussions with the industry experts of particular subject matter areas, they have come up with a curriculum which incorporates what exactly industry requires to upskill every candidate who enroll this program to the industry 4.0 era. And also the another speciality of this program is we have course mentors and faculty from all around the globe, from the prestigious universities, prestigious research laboratories, and Amrita University is having collaborations, international collaborations with over 120 foreign universities. So with the help of the international team also, we have collaborated with so many of such reputed institutions and have come up with a very envisioned strategic program which offers dream jobs to any candidates who enroll to this program. Now coming to the BCA specifically, the students we are not limiting the students to one area. Rather, the students can actually, depending upon their areas of interest, the students have the flexibility to choose the electives in particular tracks like data science and analytics, systems and networks, cybersecurity and applications and full stack development, virtual and augmented reality, cloud computing. These are all, as you see, these are all those technology areas that the Industry 4.0 is very much emphasizing on. And in each areas, we have faculty expertises to handle these courses from different universities, prestigious research labs, etc. And next thing is, another uniqueness is this course actually offers a free training, industry certification training for different courses from Cisco courses incorporating the networking essentials, then coming to enterprise development, and also so many courses under Cisco. Those who are passionate about the networking will be provided with a free training also. And nowadays, as you see, that the industries are also preferring an added industry certification to their resume, to the candidate's resume whom they are looking for. So that is also provided with this course. I'm not limiting it with Cisco. We are having courses from EC Council, security courses are there, security operations courses are provided, and pen testing courses and courses from CompTIA, IBM, etc. And also, the course doesn't limit it to a theory standard, but like we have a virtual lab incorporated to a system where the students have complete flexibility to test, run, and see the results of what they are doing as well. And also, we are providing virtual labs for these certification courses of Cisco, Amazon, AWS, etc. So these are the unique specifications that this course offers. So now this is about online BCA program. So now I would like to move on and please hand over the session to Joydeep. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, can you see me? No, there's some problem with the camera, but in the paucity of the time, I will not, I'll carry on. So first of all, I think, let me thank Amrita University, Amrita Ahead, and Technology Enabling Center for conducting this seminar or webinar in today's terms. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce you to the topic and to the people who is going to speak on this topic. First of all, I think let me start off with an anecdote. Yesterday or day before yesterday, when I sent a flyer to a couple of my friends, relations, and acquaintances, I got a message back from someone, the cousin in Calcutta, saying that, why are you so diffident? And then he went on to say, it's like the internal auditor who knocks at the door and says, sir, I have come to help you. I have not come to test you out. Or I have not come to audit you. I have come to help you. So in various ways, I think when you bring up this topic of finance and finance enabling, The general sense is finance is a roadblock. Finance is a stumbler, and finance is a strangler in some ways, and does not lead the organization to its purpose. But it's very different from that. From the organizations where we have worked, finance has always been an enabler, has been in the forefront of delivering results, and is a key and sounding board to the CEO. So in some senses of the term, we have actually grown up in organizations where they value finance, where they actually create, I would say, value streams out of finance. And CFOs are a prized part of the whole organization. So in the next 1 hour, we will actually try to unravel and also try to basically bring to you those aspects of finance which makes it such an important part of a growing organization. So I have with me two very esteemed gentlemen who are in some ways stars in the firmament of today's finance. One is Abhik Sinha and the other is Ajay Jindal. Abhik Sinha is a chartered accountant and has worked in finance for long years. He joined GL in 2012 and is also grown to be not only the CFO but is also the operations head of GL. So he brings with him a deep understanding of financial planning and analysis, which he actually did in GE for long years, and he also has a very deep people connect. So you will listen to Abhik about his deep domain expertise and how he brings together the value of finance in everyday life. Let me come to Ajay Jindal, who is the other star. And Ajay is in a very unique position to talk about finance because he is the CFO of BPL Medical, which is also a Goldman Sachs PE-backed fund. So he knows not only how to handle finance, but he also knows how to handle a private equity partner. So it's a unique organization because private equity drives organizations in very different ways from what we know. And he brings in those deep understanding and expertise. And in the next few minutes or the next hour, he will actually share with us his views on finance. So with these two very esteemed gentlemen, I'll just talk about a little about the format and then leave the floor to them to talk about their presentations and what they have in terms of insights. But for the format part of it, I think what we will do, we are around 11:30. So for the next half an hour or 25 minutes, they can present. So Abhik is going to go in first, followed by Ajay. So they will present their presentation and talk about various aspects about finance, followed by about a 15 minutes chat. So I'm going to kind of needle them a little bit and talk about, what do they think in today's world are the various contrarian views of finance. So we're not going to leave them so easily. So that's one part for about 15 minutes. And followed by another 15 minutes where we will have a question answer session and open it up to everyone who's participating. They are free to ask questions. You can direct me questions, but at the same time, I think you will benefit more if you understand from them because they are practitioners right now and they bring the most contemporary understanding and habits of finance into the domain. So with that and without much ado, I will leave the floor to Abhik Over to you, Abhi. If you want to add to your stellar record anything else you want to talk about yourself, or you can start off with the presentation.
Thank you, Jaideep, and thank you, Amrita Lakshmi ma'am, for the warm welcome at the beginning. And hearing about oneself is always a little embarrassing. So I can assure you, Jaideep makes it sound much more bigger than what it actually is. So we are still all students of the game, and that's what we will be all our lives. So thanks, Jaideep, for the opportunity to come, and a warm welcome to all of you once more. So as Jaideep explained the format, we do have a few pages that we felt will be helpful for us to talk a little bit about the concept. And getting started, I hope you can all see the presentation on the screen. And the concept is, of course, growing organizations through finance. So the agenda and how we kind of designed a few pages to talk through a little bit is how the function of finance and any finance professional over the generations has kind of changed from being what was erstwhile a controller to what today, as a couple of speakers mentioned before, to becoming an enabling function for the organization. We'll try to unravel a few concepts about when we say enabler, what does the concept of enabler actually apply to? And there we'll talk a little bit about how finance or a finance professional today contributes to growth. How do we add value to an organization? And how critically important the finance function has become as a part of the larger decision making of the organization. We will also talk a little bit about a rule of five. This is more a personal sharing of myself along with Ajay, who we have kind of lived through some of these 5 principles or pillars. And then Ajay will talk a little bit more in detail about the 5 critical pillars of finance function, more coming from his perspective of having worked with not only a organization that has countrywide presence, but also with a PE partner who is a large promoter of the organization. So that's a bit of the broad format. And just a quick check, hope I am audible and the screen's visible for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. So, just taking a little help from Dilbert, some of you would be familiar with this cartoon also probably. So, but if you can just take a moment and see this, I mean, it says a quote that nothing is more dangerous than a boss with a spreadsheet. And I'll pause for a minute. And what does strike to you, up front as what used to be historically probably a guy with a spreadsheet? What are the 3 words in this or anything that strikes to you if you take a pause and think about it? I think 3 words there strikes out to me that the way the world used to look at a finance professional, somewhat are given a epithet of a boss, not really boss in the sense of a hierarchy, but somebody who really controls decisions, somebody who has a lot of power to say yes or no, maybe somebody who can be a decision maker for the future, right? So there's the concept of a little bit of a boss. Spreadsheet, I mean, for a long time growing up as a finance guy, I used to keep hearing from people in the business that I don't get it what you do in Excel, but my gut feel is this. What is it that your Excel is? Why is the Excel giving you a different thought process? And the third one, and probably the more, the more to do with the image of what the finance function used to be, dangerous. Guys who control your salary, guys who suddenly out of the blue develop and generate numbers for us. They are the ones who decide the results of the organization. A culmination of all 3 together is what it used to be in the form of what the finance function to be in the past. And here in this page, I'm talking a little bit about finance as a control function and what used to be the traditional roles of a finance professional, always seen through the eyes of the business. We used to be the record keepers. We used to be known as the bean counters, the reporting guys, the accounting guys, responsible for budgeting, fund management. We are the ones who keeps the firm liquid and make sure that people get salaries on time, vendors get paid on time, and of course, responsible for audit, management, control setting. This used to be what used to be the erstwhile view of finance as a function. And while fundamentally the roles have not changed, it has developed nuances which was not there maybe 30 years back. So the 3 core functions that we spoke about in the prior slide, like accounting, record keeping, budgeting, audit, control setting, even today forms the DNA of a core finance function. However, the way we go about it has changed. Like for accounting, record keeping, automation has transformed the way that we approach that work today. It's opened up many new avenues of finance roles, of jobs and opportunities for the future. Budgeting and fund management, very core to our finance function even today, but probably added with functions like predictive analytics and financing. It's not about only building a budget, but also being able to predict where trends are going. Audit, control setting, compliance still continues to be the regulatory aspect of it. The stewardship function that we call still continues to be the DNA of the function, but added with fraud prevention and preemptive controls. It is not about us coming in historically and trying to figure out where we went wrong, but can we build a controlled environment which discourages fraud from taking place, which builds strong controls? The blue box below is where probably over the last decade or more and more the finance function is veered towards. And there, we'll talk about it a little bit more in the coming up slides, is finance partners' role as a business partner. We are no more only the people who are recording numbers and reporting numbers. We are more and more becoming strategic partners, and that's where the future of finance lies. And last, the trusted advisor and the risk taker. We have to build as we move forward, as we are today and as we move forward as finance professionals, we have to build that attitude and appetite for a little bit of a risk with the appropriate caveats and become a trusted partner, trusted advisor for the business, where the business leans on us as a function to give them the right advice at the right time. So we always thought, Simpson used to say, right, that everything lasts forever. And probably 30 years back, if you asked a finance professional, is this the way the world will always be like? And if you ask the business about finance, yes, everything lasts forever, right? So that's the way we wanted it to be, but does it? The pace of change that forces us to change has moved us, or actually probed us, into a completely different direction. And that's where is we'll now talk through in the next 3 slides, 3 critical aspects of how this change has happened and what tomorrow's, many of you are going to step into the corporate world tomorrow. You're going to take on the role as a finance partner. As you think of yourself and as you arm yourself with the technical skills that this role requires, there are 3 critical aspects that we would like to leave you with today. And the first question to that is, are we as finance professionals growth partners, or are we actually detractors to the business? So, the big change is often accepting that change in our mindset, that you are no more a controller who is just standing there like a traffic police, giving a red light or a green light or an amber light. We have to be agile and move in steps of the business. And decision making is the critical step up. No more can the finance function, or does the finance function today, just give options to the business and steps away from the decision making. With a lot of trust and with a lot of maturity, the finance professional is given a step or a seat at the table, where we are a critical part of the decision-making process itself. And that means that you are accountable, along with our operational colleagues. We are equally accountable to the decisions and the direction that a business takes. And the third concept, which is the bottom right of the page, is the one that I spoke about a little bit earlier, where finance sits on significant facts and data. And that's where, when yesterday business used to come and say that we don't really get you where you come from, and often decisions used to be taken sometimes on a gut feel, which can take you almost anywhere, but can never be always accurate, is a critical part of using that facts and data, adding to that a certain amount of risk appetite, but being pragmatic about it, is where the finance careers for the future are moving towards. Organizations today have to have a pretty strong streak of entrepreneurship built in them. It's not left to only the CEO or the board to decide the direction of the organization. Often the best ideas come from people on the floor, on the shop floors, right? On the people in the forefront of business. Those ideas need to be funneled up, the risk profile assessed, and we need to work together with the leadership to decide the steps and the direction. And that's where the question of becoming a trusted advisor and risk taker partially. It doesn't mean finance from tomorrow throws caution to the wind and just decides helter-skelter. It does mean that you use the facts, the data that you are in control of to help the business make the right decisions. Moving on to the second concept, that how relevant are we to the business? As finance professionals, all of us at every point in time are constantly thinking that, is finance as a function critical to the business? And that question will never be answered as yes, unless we are keeping pace with the changes. And there, the first principle of your operating model, yesterday's innovation or the way we used to think or do things has completely changed today. Accounts, your erstwhile picture of an accounts function used to be a room full of people only processing vouchers, only doing accounts. That principle has now completely been changed with the principles of outsourcing and making it more in trend with the times today, insourcing. Like in JLL today, we don't outsource our routine processes to, say, an Accenture outside, but we have insourced it, where based out of Gurgaon in one of our captives, there is a team of almost 1,000 professionals sitting there and doing the accounts function of the entire world, sitting somewhere out of Gurgaon. The benefits of being able to insource and get scale and volume is significant. And that's where, as finance professionals, we have to constantly think of innovating through our operating model. Building partnerships is the principle where you build relationships with your business leaders, where probably a large part of a finance professional's time today is spent talking to his business leader, trying to understand where is the business leader thinking, what are the opportunities that he's thinking about. In many ways, the job of a finance partner is neither to encourage nor to discourage, but actually help the business partner see the pros and cons of every approach. That's where we are best at, using the data, the facts that is in our control, to go to the business leader and tell them that, look, by taking this decision, these are the benefits of this and these are the risks that we have to, and then work with the business leader to ensure that a balanced approach is taken. And of course, new technologies. I mean, again, we do talk a lot about constantly, taking on new technologies. What are the things that we can do to give finance a cutting edge? But here, the only caution that I have always felt in my own experience is technology alone is never the answer. And we should not keep jumping at every single change of technology that comes our way. We should be a little bit balanced there, pace ourselves, understand the appetite and the pace of our own organization where we are a part of, and then do what's more practical and beneficial. In every organization, if I touch my heart, even in JLL, I think there are at least 10 or 15 such investments in softwares and in processes which actually do not make sense. So the third principle on technology, what I was trying to mention is, if you are not cautious, we might end up, having a lot of investment done in technology, but some of which becomes redundant over a period of time. So moving on to the next principle of it, in the interest of time, Jaideep, which is the most critical one, that now that finance has a seat on the table, how do we ensure that by supporting effective decision making? And there are three large principles there, but I'll talk a little bit about first creating the trust. And there is the principle of getting the basics right first time. That, however the role emerges over a period of time, finance will still be always responsible for getting the right data. And that's where is our responsibility of getting the basics right. And devil is always in the details. A good finance professional will always have an eye for numbers or a nose for numbers, and that's a skill that I'm sure in your days as you are studying through these courses is something that you will have to work on. However, we emerge as a role, the stewardship function, which is that role of being responsible for compliance, ensuring audit happens in the right at the right time and in the right direction. Treating risk as one of the key areas we keep an eye out for is extremely critical and will always continue to be a part of our DNA. So as finance professionals, we cannot take our eyes away from that at any point. And the third one is something that I have felt, and I'm sure many of us in this room have felt is a critical attribute for a finance professional, is listening, and really listening. Alex Ferguson was one of the big coaches in the world of football. He used to say that there is a reason God gave us 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. And the principle of that is something that I have personally found very effective all my life, that if you are quiet enough and if you're really listening to the people around you, often a lot of trends, often a lot of clues about how the organization is functioning and how we can play a larger role comes out of that. And often an empathetic listening is something that we need to do to listen to our teams as well, which brings me to the second point of building talent. Today, many of you young professionals, when you go and join an organization, your first step is going to be to become a part of a team. And that's where in the initial stages of your life, your biggest responsibility is going to be contribute to the success of the team and make the team stronger. But as you go through your life and as you take on larger roles, as you yourself become team leaders, there the responsibility is more not only to be yourself well versed in what you are doing, but then constantly building the talent capability of your organization, constantly thinking of succession planning and building a culture of respect where everybody has a right to speak up and everybody is heard in a respectful manner to each other. And that's where you will always catch on to the best ideas. And lastly, coming from our own audit background, what never fails is being able to ask the right questions. That, it's not only about reporting of what happened, but are you able to ask the right questions to your business leaders? Are you able to show a mirror to the business that the business might be feeling that we are doing a great job, but are you in a realistic way able to reflect what the business is actually doing without being negatively critical, but being realistic at the same time? Sometimes business leaders often don't like finance professionals who are only in a negative frame of mind. I would never encourage or advise you to take that path, but at the same time, you have to speak the truth and you need to hold a mirror to the business that this is where you are doing well and this is probably where we can do a little better. Try and give it a positive swing, because that always gives you that little edge where the business leader looks at you and thinks that this is somebody who understands. Because remember, the guy in front of the market, out in the forefront getting business, has a tough enough job. What nobody likes from a business team is a finance guy who is constantly critical, constantly negative. We can always do our job with the right spirit of positivity. And in the interest of time, on the last page from mine, before I hand over to Ajay, something that we have all learned from is a rule of 5 for finance. These are the 5 skills that as finance professional we'll constantly need. The builder and the persuader, these are skills where we are constantly working towards a vision of where we want the organization to be and how finance can contribute more. Persuader is being able to transform complex principles, complex ideas in a simple way. Keep challenging the set assumptions in a positive way and communicate and show the mirror to the business that I spoke about. The right to, which is a learner and doer, is something that we will all be all throughout our lives. It doesn't end with when you finish your BBA course or your MBA course from Amrita Institute. It extends all throughout your life, where you are probably learning every single day. And that's where your listening skills become critical. You have to have functional expertise, that's a given. But you have to constantly be also open to learn from the trends that's changing around you. And the middle of it is where today's principle, I bring it back to the concept with which we started and what we are talking about today, is be a strategist, developing insights, constantly work with the business, get the big picture, and partner the business for growth. So with that, I'll now hand over to Ajay for his part.
Great. So thank you, Avik. So am I audible to all?
Yes.
Yes. I think the business principle which Avik was talking about, it is not relevant even for freshers, even for today. So many things we still need to follow and continue to follow that. So there is a commonality. He was talking of 5 rules. I'm also talking of 5 functions divided within finance. So if you see, the first one is controllership and corporate governance. So controllership and corporate governance, by that I mean 2 things. One is they were following the statutory laws with respect to any income tax, company act, provident fund act, or labor laws, shops and office. There are so many acts which needs to be followed, and there is an internal controls which has to be there. So if we look at, most of the time we put a lot of emphasis in following the statutory guidelines so that we are clear with the income tax authorities or the company act authorities. But most of the issue happens on the internal controls. For example, when you're paying the accounts payable, are you paying to the right account? Or do you have adequate check and balances, whether you're paying more, you're paying less? Similarly, in account receivable, is the correct account is getting reflected, is getting adjusted, or it's not getting adjusted to the right thing? So, and many times people feel that corporate controllership and corporate governance can be outsourced. It can be done by external agencies and it's a mundane job, but it is not. It is very important, because if you look at any issues which is happening in the corporate world, then everyone talks about controllership and corporate governance. Is the controllership weak? How is the corporate governance in that organization? If you recall, around a year back, Infosys, there was a whistleblower who told that accounting policy of revenue recognition is not right in Infosys, and suddenly Infosys stock falling down like anything. So because people started losing trust on the financials. So controllership and corporate governance give investors, whether investors can be in the form of a private equity investor, it can be a public shareholder, mutual fund, institutional investors, they all need that comfort. And you will see that people who are having a better corporate governance and controllership, they have a higher trust. And that's how even their share valuation is done, whether they are listed or they're not listed. But controllership and corporate governance gives trust that whatever is being reported, whatever policies and processes companies are following, that is right. So trust. So it's very important, controllership and corporate governance. Now, after that, the second question, if we talk about, is the working capital. By that, actually, I meant was the cash flow from operations. So, cash flow from operations is basically working capital as well as the company's business. The working capital is in the form of maximum. We talk about inventories and receivables, how we are framing our receivable credit policies, how on inventories we are negotiating with our suppliers, how we are negotiating on letter of credits, how we are negotiating on bill discountings. So if you have an effective working capital, so how many working capital cycle we are having in a year? So that also is very important. For example, if you look at, nowadays we see a lot of departmental stores being there. All those departmental stores, whatever we purchase, we pay cash. So they don't have any issue on receivables. Plus the inventory which they keep in their stores, they will have a credit period of 30 days or a 60 days. So they are having a very good working capital cycle. I was talking to one of the hospitals. Because in hospital we feel that whenever you go, you pay cash, and you get they also have the nil receivables. But it was not that way. They were saying that for them also, a lot of patients who are having a cashless settlement insurance, so they have to go to the insurance company to get the money, and that takes a lot of time. So that is a different cycle of receivables. So this is very important, considering the lower the working capital cycle, higher the business valuation becomes, because that money which is extra cash which gets generated from the business, so that cash can be used for further growth of business. You don't have to go to the bankers or the financial institutions or an NBFC or a private equity investor to raise funding. So internal cash generation itself can help to grow the business. Similarly, other than working capital, the foreign exchange is very important, because many of nowadays, a lot of forex and treasury management is being there. So how are we evaluating the risk of foreign exchange? Because foreign exchange is always varying between, sometime it is more, sometime it is less. How an organization is managing that risk? So that is very important, that how the forex management is also being done. Now, these two functions which I mentioned, controllership and managing the cash flow, was majorly I have seen in the early part of my career. These are the two pillars which was more being talked about. So now from third to fifth, I see that being getting evolved in the last 10 years. So the third part, if you see, is the capital allocation and fundraising. So the capital which is available, how we get the capital to fund the business. The business can be funded by increasing more working capital. If your business is growing and your working capital cycle is higher, you will continue to put more and more fund into working capital. Plus, in order to grow more business, whether you do a merger and acquisitions, whether you put more capital intensive machineries, whether you open more and more stores in case of nowadays these supermarkets, or whether you open more and more hospital chains. So all those things will need capital. So how do we get those capital, and what are the terms of getting those capitals? What will be the cost of capital? So these things have become very important. And then when we are raising capital, when we are allocating that capital, where we need to put that investment in business, how much is the risk associated with that? What is the risk appetite of the business? What is the risk appetite of the board of directors or the investors? So based on that, those decisions has to be taken. So this has taken a big support, or big, I would say, function of finance, where it is becoming more and more relevant. Now, coming to the fourth one, where I'm saying that business finance driving sales and profitability. So driving sales and profitability does not mean that finance will go and start doing the sales, but if you see a lot of schemes nowadays, people floats. If you see in the online business, every time there are certain schemes. Now, in fact, when we went into home health business, and then we started putting our product in Amazon, so almost every week, team discuss with me what should be the how should we go with it? What should be the scheme? How it can benefit company? How it can benefit consumer? How can we improve our sales? So many things have started happening on sales. And in profitability, how can you drive the mix? How the mix can be driven? How should we maintain our average sale price? How do we drive our cost down? So all those factors started coming in for the finance team. So which I say lot and lot. I spend most of my time on the business finance, capital allocation, and MIS and analytics. These are the three where I spend most of my time nowadays. Now coming to the fifth one, MIS and analytics to provide business insights. So earlier I used to see that we used to report the MIS. So now the MIS, we need to do more and more and more analytics. And sometimes we can say that we are getting paralytic by analytics, but whatever said and done, but analysis has to be done. A lot of business insights has to be there. And I would say now with so many tools being available, whether it is an ERP tool, a lot of softwares are being available to make those MIs done. But still someone needs to drive those. Someone needs to drive those metrics, how those metrics has to be driven. I always tell my team, if you have to just pull the report and send it, that anyone can do it. So that anyone, nowadays system is doing it. So many things are available. Now there are AIs, there are bots are coming up, which is taking up most of the job, repeated job. And what is the value addition we as a finance professionals are doing? So that is very important that, we not only provide insights, we also shake hand with business to drive it. So right now, how the success of the organization is being defined. In my view, success of the organization is not only meeting the financial metrics, increasing the shareholder values. So to increase the shareholder value, it is not only sales, marketing, are the people who, because their impact is directly seen on the business. It is finance also. All of them together should work together to see how the shareholder value is increasing. So that is most important. Even a small thing, even I saw that even a small branding mistake impacts the brand, impacts the valuation. Even the small controllership lapse can earn you a disrepute, which impact total overall the valuation of the business. So whatever we do, so now I see one thing which is coming up. All the actions, whether finance does it, marketing does it, sales does it, everything will boils down to one thing. Is it increasing the shareholder values? Whether how does it increase? Because most of us think earlier that my job is done, I've done my controllership, audit has to be done, sales has been reported, sales will say I met my target. That's how my target was. So these are all small metrics which has to be definitely met and done. But all this together final result should be to increase the shareholder valuation. So that's how I see, because I worked with private equity. I also worked with many of the private equities firms which have their share valuation done. So I see that is the maximum thing, which is I see the big transformation happening in the finance function, is that everything should be perfect. That is definitely be there. And finance cannot say that this is a controllership role, that is how you have to do it. We need to see that business works definitely on a tight controllership and compliant way, but also meets the other business objectives, and together our valuation of shareholder valuation of business goes up year on year, quarter on quarter. So thanks from my side. Finally it's over. So any question, anything I'm happy for it.
Yeah. So I think can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible? Yeah. So I think there's some problem with my camera, but nevertheless, at least I'm audible. So thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Avik, for this wonderful insights and the presentation. So we have about half an hour left. So what my plan is, in the next 15 minutes, I'll trigger some questions, a discussion between you both, and then we'll leave it to the floor if further questions come up and stimulates more thought. Okay. So I think given that plan, so let me ask you the first question. I think it's very right, as you really said, that you need to see the big picture. You need to see. You have to be an enabler. But as you see the finance professionals who are going to be there in the next period of 21st century, what do you think are the main traits? You've talked about 5 very important traits, but what do you think that the main traits that they should inculcate or work on to become successful financial professionals? So either of you can take the question and throw some light.
So I'll take this up, we can add to it. So I think in my view, first of all thing is communication. Communication not only to the external world, even to the internal world. So finance team has to work with all the people in the company. So there has to be a good communication channel which should be there between inter-departments. So not only to give good news, also to give bad news, and share all the inputs. So communication is one of the important tools. Second thing I will put is the analytics. So has to be a lot of analytics being done so that more and more information, because right now we are in a world where most earlier the question was more of an intuitive world. Now we talk of more decision based on data inputs. So that is very important that we look at communication thing, and then we have a good analytics things which should be there. So these are, I would say, 2 of the major things which finance person function should have the trait which they should carry forward with them.
Yeah. Maybe if I have to add on, I mean, completely agree with Ajay. Communication, particularly, many finance professionals, we like to kind of seclude ourselves in our work and keep working and not really open ourselves up to have a conversation or communication. I think for the 21st century, Joydeep, as you asked the question, being clear communicators about the way we are thinking or we are looking at different proposals or the situation of the business, communication plays a critical part, and analytics in the sense of it's okay to see a set of numbers, but what is the numbers trying to tell you? And there's no one better than finance to interpret it and say. I'll probably add on as the principle of knowledge. Finance is a very technical subject in the sense where not everybody can look at a set of numbers or understand a set of rules that the numbers are hovered around. So what I think is important is if you think of the 5 pillars that I spoke about, the doer and the knowledge aspect of it, we have to constantly keep ourselves open to learning new skills about knowing what's happening in the world around us. The way the internet is opened up, the way e-commerce is opened up, the way we are doing transactions today is virtually almost 180-degree different from what it used to be 20 years back. So you need to be nimble, and the success and who survives in this 21st century is the one who is the most adaptive. So we have to constantly be nimble and adapt to change all around us. So I think that knowledge and adaptability, Joydeep, are the 2 that I would add on to Ajay's communication and analytic skills.
So I think I would add one more point on the risk part, that he should also be a risk taker, with whatever is the appetite of organization. Based on that, risk analysis is very important, and I see a lot of things getting towards that. So whenever we prepare any project, so we always put that what is the probability of success and what is the risk the organization is taking. So that should also be there. It should not be that finance is safe, only a scorer who will tell the score. He will also be the risk taker along with the organization.
This actually brings me to the next issue, and it actually triggers up from the thoughts that you sparked, Avik, and you talked about, Ajay, is that where are the jobs going? Because if you see what's happening is, the transaction or the lower level jobs are getting taken over by AI and bot, etc. When I joined the organization, years back, we had a room full of compists. And then 1991 came and computerization came. The whole room was gone. So therefore, if you are going to have, AI coming in such full force, so the lower level transactional jobs will go. So there will be a level of jobs which is completely up there and very, very, I would say, classified jobs where you have to be a thinker, etc. Everyone cannot reach there. Okay. So therefore, what do you do to reach there, and how do you survive in in a world which is becoming fast mechanized and fast, I would say, artificially intelligence-sized in that sense. And then how do you go from there? I mean, because jobs will shrink.
Yeah, maybe Ajay, I'll take it and then you can add on. And I think the biggest indicator of this is probably comes from the economic growth in today's world. If you see any growth statement that comes, say the different governments come up with different growth numbers, you will see that there's a joint focus, one on productivity, on automation, on bringing in new technology, and at the same time, an increased focus on reducing unemployment. So, I come from a state where when computers came for the first time, there was a huge hue and cry that this means that everybody will lose their job. And that's why there was a segment of people who thought that we will not allow computerization in our society. While what happened was quite the adverse, that people upskilled themselves and became computer literate, and that opened up a completely different avenue of employment opportunities and created a much better and a more connected society. I think the answer lies exactly there, even to this question. Today, when there's a lot of automation happening around us in the finance department, I get a lot of this question from team members who have been used to doing a certain kind of activities all their life. The answer is to be what I mentioned a little bit, that being adaptive and upskilling yourselves. That yes, maybe tomorrow just the processing of a voucher will no longer be a skill that will be done by a human being. There might be bots tomorrow who will take up that completely routine activity. At the same time, there will be a new activity coming in as to if somebody can understand the trend of the kind of payments that's happening and can he prevent a payment fraud happening tomorrow. That's a new skill that was never thought about yesteryears. When we were building up an accounts payable function, nobody used to think that, will I end up paying by doing an RTGS to somebody who is a completely fraud link that's come to me, and I end up paying somebody who's a fraud acting in the back end. It's a completely new change to the society and new skills coming. So, keeping it short, I think the answer is automation or progress in technology will never be stopped. You will always have that happening around you. Newer and newer firms are going to come. Look at the way Uber changed the world, Ola changed the world around us. Look at the way so many things happen. The Facebook, the Twitters of the world change the way we communicate and stay in touch with our friends. We will have to be opening ourselves constantly to constant change around us. It's how we upskill ourselves and adapt ourselves to newer technologies.
Ajay, you want to add?
I think fair, I agree with Avik, because when I started my career, I was doing the accounts payable head. I was the accounts payable head. Now I don't see a chartered accountant doing the accounts payable job. It is being done by a BCom. Now with technology coming up to see that lot less and less of human error possibility we are coming up with. Bot is coming up, AI is coming up, so that chances of human error gets reduced, and it will continue. Because even in the bank, I used to see that 1 to 500, someone will update the passbook, then 500, 1 to someone will update. Nowadays, we don't even visit the bank to see the passbook. So things will be there. Automation will continue to happen. Only thing, as Avik was mentioning, that upskilling will be there, and we should not be restricted to do the finance job. Nowadays, I see a lot of supply chain job is being done by a finance, and they are doing a good job there. So lots and lot of avenues are being there, and people should be open to learn those skills and get a career there, because there are lots of opportunities coming up, because companies are growing, and company will come up with all these innovations, because everyone wants to reduce the cost and put more and more internal controls to reduce more how much human error they can reduce. So that's that trend. So this will continue. Only thing is, as I was mentioning, you need to get upskill. You should be open to all the avenues, wherever you can contribute. Nowadays I see even in supply chain, even in IT, I see a lot of finance folks who are making good career, and not only good career, they are able to contribute much more.
So in fact, I think that's a great point, Ajay makes. And today I see in my firm, JLL, we also do a lot of these big deals, the financing deals. I see so many finance professionals are completely in the deal-making space. And they are young professionals at the age of 25, some of them 30. where they even come to the organizations during interviews saying that I don't want to be in the traditional accounting space or in the traditional space. I want to be in hardcore finance. I want to be doing deals. I want to be sitting there giving solutions to an investor with a lot with surplus funds on how will they invest. I want to be there with firms who want to do capital restructuring. So a lot of new spaces are coming up where finance professionals are going. So to all of you young students who are at this moment building your own life, I think it's a very exciting world out there. Where you need to be is to understand your own strength areas, really understand yourself and what really excites you. What we would actually encourage you is, when we were growing up and where you are growing up and stepping up, the world is far more exciting space, but don't probably look at many opportunities at the same time. I think to some extent, your own self-realization of where your skills are, what you will truly enjoy, is where you should try to see if you can slowly maneuver yourself towards.
So, Abhik, no, that's a very important point. So basically what both of you are saying is that complexity will throw up opportunities. What you need to do is basically be adaptable to it and be open to changes. So that's what basically both of you are saying. But this question of to be adaptable to change actually brings me to the other question, which is basically the question of smell. Everything is not crafted or logicized in that logic. It's not logical. Okay. So there are opportunities which come by your way and you have to grab it, or you leave it. And you do not know what is the path you're going to take, and particularly for a young budding professional that becomes a challenge. Okay. So how does a young professional figure his way out? What is the way he needs to take himself? Because it's going to be more complex, it is going to be written with technologies, and he has to find his way out. So what is the way out? And any tips for that?
Ajay, you want to go first?
So, in my view, Jodip, I think it all depends the youngsters who are doing their graduation. First, they need to see that where is their passion in which thing. Many times we see that passion we normally decide about the marks you score in a subject. For example, I say that sometimes you score more in accounts, people will say I have a passion for accounts. Or if I score more on business management, I have a passion for business management. So I would not say that marks decides what's your passion or what's your interest. So first of all, what's your main passion, what is driving more, and then you should try to pursue your career in that region wherever you are getting that kick from yourself. Now there can be a situation where you don't get the opportunity in that sector where you are more intended. So that will definitely come up, but keep yourself busy, keep engaged wherever you get opportunity, just stick with it and get yourself developed. So that's what I would say to the college students. So because not only go with mark sheet, other than mark sheet, what makes you more interesting, what is driving you, based on that you decide the course. Try to get into that. If you are somehow not getting opportunity in that side, you grab whatever you are getting and from there you develop yourself. I have seen in the youngster age many times, we are not able to decide what is it we want to do. But suddenly when you start working slowly, doors opens up and you start entering those doors and you are able to make your path.
Yeah, but is there any role for guys? Because back in the days when Facebook was not there and and the world was not so connected, we had our uncles and friends and family who used to be the guys and coaches, and they were the people who were the internet. So do you still feel that there is a role for these type of guys who will at least channelize you to the right path? So do you need role models on the way?
I think mentorship, George, will always play a critical part in life. In JLL, for example, we have a formal mentorship channel itself, where senior leaders of the firm who are interested in that actually voluntarily take on a young and a talented member who says that he wants a little bit of a help in terms of coaching, counseling, or sometimes often just being a shoulder to talk to. The same principle that you talked about, we used to have when we were growing up, friends around us or uncles or knowledge partners who used to always help and guide us. That need has never gone away. And honestly, Jyoति, I think in today's world, that opportunity is also a lot more. Forums like LinkedIn, for the right forums in Facebook, say for finance professional, the right places to be a part of. In Twitter, there are many communities around finance, around your own passion, your areas, where you can contribute to as well as learn from other people. I think with the explosion of social media, what you don't want to become is somebody who's only somebody who's at the receptive end of the social media. You want to be an active participant in that, in the sense that it should help you becoming more productive and more creative. I think the avenues of reaching out today to people who are knowledgeable about something or people who can help you is much more. For example, in my LinkedIn account, I'm amazed to see the kind of people who just reach out to me and just say that I have this kind of a skill. Is there any opportunity in your organization? Sometimes when you don't have time, you don't always respond to each one. But sometimes when I have time, I just send it to maybe somebody I know who's looking for somebody like that. So what Ajay said, I think, is very relevant. I mean, all of you are at the cusp of starting your professional journey. I think it's very important at this stage for you to identify what is your passion. And what nobody can promise to you is that you will get a break towards your passion on day one. You may not. You may need to start with something that comes your way, because often at the start of your career, when you don't have a lot of experience, you will not have a lot of choices. But never lose touch with that core passion of yourself. I think the world has become so competitive and so fast changing that unless you are veering yourself more and more towards what you really like to do and what you feel you will enjoy and what you will have fun out of, you will not have that experience otherwise of enjoying going to work. And what you really want to aspire to and what you should try all your life is when you wake up in the morning, you should feel excited to go to work that day. You should not be thinking that again I have to go another day to do something to earn a living. If you can veer yourself slowly towards there, right? Like you are all a part of this movement of Amrita Institute. The mother herself, I mean, her passion was helping people, right? And look what she has created all around you. So that should be your biggest guide, your biggest motivation, that what is it that really truly moves you? And it might be multiple things. You can be a finance professional. At the same time, you might want to do a lot of societal benefits. So you want to do a little bit of CSR. You might be a great coach. So you might want to be a mentor also at your side time. Life will give you that experience. But what I feel is very important is to slowly and steadily, but in a determined way, keep yourself as close to your passion as you can.
Absolutely. In fact, this brings me just to my mind one thought. Bill Connerty, who was the CFO, as the HRO of Human Resources Officer of Jack Welch, used to famously say that every day when you go to office, you should look forward to three things. One, you should learn every day. It should be a learning process. It can't be that you don't learn. Second, you should grow every day. It's very important that you grow either personally or professionally. And third is you should have fun every day. Either of these are lacking, you should just move out. That's not the place you should do. So actually, it's actually fun in some ways. So we are actually come to the. If you want to add quickly anything, Ajay,
I will add something there. I will add here. So I think Avik mentioned a very important point of mentorship in GLA. So I would say that if, in fact, in my career span, you learn more from your peer or a little bit senior people. So, for example, in Amrita University, it might be a 3-year course or a 4-year course. So senior can become a mentor of junior. So that way, say one senior might have 5 or 6 junior people who they can mentor. So there can be two things. One is that junior are getting those mentorship, number one. Number two, even the seniors are becoming a leader or a manager who are able to manage those 5-6 resources. So that is very important that those with the people get connected, because GLL is a big firm, so they might have those processes in multinational companies, but overall in India we lack this type of mentorship program everywhere. So most of the reason that most of the people struggle to get the right guidance. So those things I think universities or institutes must be doing, or if they are not doing, they should do that.
Yep, absolutely. So that brings us to the close of the discussion. If there are any thoughts, questions, we would love to answer. But in the just put it in your chat box and we will answer them. We have about 7 minutes left, but we should be able to give you a quick answer. There is one question which has already come up, and before others come up, so I just wanted to ask you. Why are the shareholders always skeptical about the internal affairs of the company? The shareholders are skeptical always about what's going on inside. And you see it in the AGMs all the time.
I can maybe just, maybe Ajay is more versed in this, but maybe a quick shot is, I mean, shouldn't you be, given that it is your money with which you have bought into a share of a firm, I think a healthy bit of skepticism or cynicism is always there, where you will feel that if I've invested in something, the reason I invest is because I want my money to grow, my investment to grow. I don't think the skepticism should be negative, but the purpose of an investor, and today is not only the retail investors, there are the big institutional fund houses, there are the big large investors who will invest into a firm. They will want to be actively involved into the operations, not on a day-to-day operations level, but at least at the broad strategic level. There are, of course, Ajay referred to, for example, the Infosys example that happened just around a year back, where there was an ombudsman complaint that something was wrong in some process, which led to a significant amount of investors questioning as to in what direction is the firm going, which actually ended up in the CEO coming to the public forum and explaining that, look, this is what we are doing to enhance the controls. Often that kind of active questioning is often healthy also, in the sense of trying to understand in what direction is the firm going, whether there are any concerns on that. At the same time, what you don't want to be is always of the negative end of questions, or questions that actually push you back. So it's often a right mix, but in most cases, the big investors will be participating along with you in the decision making, helping you, sometimes giving their inputs, because they often have multi-industry experiences to what they feel can be a good progressive solution to some problem that the organization is facing. Ajay, maybe you might want to add on.
Okay. I'll ask you, so while Ajay comes back, I think there is another question. When we are talking about a change from controller to an enabler, isn't there a need of an attitudinal change? Is it being consciously done in the profession? Ajay,
Yes, absolutely.
Let's try Ajay.
Is it?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
So I'll just say, add on that shareholder thing. I think on that major is shareholder. What shareholder looks for is always that shareholder value should go up and always up. But at the same time, when the share values are going up, they want to be sure that it is a real increase in the value. So there should not be any internal issues which should pull them down. And if the value is going down, then also they have a concern: is it something wrong in the in the control shifting, that something wrong is happening? So people that way, if things are not going right, still as a human nature, you want to be sure something is wrong or not. If it is going up, you want to be sure, it should always be going up. So that also keeps you in check, that you are always on course to see that things are being right, and you being an advocacy of doing the right thing, whatever best to your knowledge, you will continue to do so.
Okay, let me switch to the other question. The question was on the change from enabler to a controller, and therefore is an attitudinal change required? And is it being consciously followed in the profession? Because the profession consists of various types of people, and whether it is being followed.
I think it's an excellent question actually, because and I covered this in one of the slides, where the biggest thing is to accept that change that has happened and what's expected from finance professionals. From my own personal experience, I do cover a bit of operations along with finance. For a major part of the year, I'm thinking the operations hat of how to grow the business, how to make the right investment decisions, how to get the right hiring, whether all my business teams are appropriately they have the right talent to win in the marketplace. That's a huge attitudinal change, because if I'm constantly wearing only the controller hat, then I'll be constantly thinking that, do I have this in the budget? Is this the right investment to do? Maybe I should be a little bit more careful. I think it's always a right balance where you have to, and that's where the risk taker of in a pragmatic way, that principle becomes very critical for us, where we will have to participate along with the business in the growth strategy. It's a mindset change, whether it is being consciously done in the profession. I think people in the profession, once we start our professional journey, we all realize it very quick that unless you are a part of the enabling function, you will not really be able to make a difference, and your own aspirations will not be fulfilled. However, whether we can do more in the course level itself, when we are building finance professionals, when we are building chartered accountants, I do feel there is a room for a bit more of those practical dimensions to be given, and that's something I'm sure we'll reach there over a period of time.
No, absolutely. I think that's an area that we all need to work on. I have one more question, and I think it's a very interesting question. How may I get started in this finance world if I am an undergraduate first year student at a particular IIT or anywhere else? So it's a very general question, but it's a very important question. Someone wants to come into finance world and wants to take a chair. What is the roadmap? How do you get it? What do you do?
Jodip, is it a question for Amrita Lakshmi ma'am or for us?
No, it's basically anyone of you can do, and Amrita Lakshmi ma'am, if she wants to add, she's free to add.
So I will take this up, or you can add. So my view that in someone has to take finance and someone has to go bigger in the finance level, those 5 pillars which I was mentioning. So these things has to be done some part of their career. So once you get mastery to all that will lead to becoming a bigger position. So that's how it has to be. So taking a right education forum in the sense that you should have the right finance degree. At the same time that, for example, if someone has to do the commerce, he has to do BCom, and say he has to do any BBA in commerce, in finance, or a CA, or a cost accountancy. Based on that thing, he has to then, based on that, if someone has done BBA in finance, so their strength might be more on the business finance side, more on the fundraising side, MIS side. So if someone is a CA, there will be more on the controllership side, on the working capital side. So mix of both. So on those 5 pillars, I would say you should have a mastery of at least 3, and 2 might be expert knowledge, and 2 might be a working knowledge. So that should be helping person to go.
Just one more thing which I wanted to add is that a practical way of doing all this is, while you are studying, try to do internships in good institutions, good companies, where you can get good mentors. And those will actually lead you to a higher pedestal. So getting into good projects, getting into good internships is one of the very key constituents of getting into this world. You may not be able to jump immediately, but at least it will give you connections, network, and the way to go forward. So while academic is very important, and it is basically the passport for getting in, I think networks are the visas for getting into any job. So that's extremely important that you have a strong network. So that's something that you need to do. I'm running out of time, but I'll take this question. Can I shift into finance side after doing a job in it for 3 years? So can I, where my goal to start a company which helps me understanding finance? So what Kachan is saying is that, can I shift to finance side after doing a job for 3 years, when my goal is to start out a company which helps me in understanding finance? So can you shift at any point of time? Yes, you can shift at any point of time. So that's not a problem. But you should have the right connections, the network is extremely important. So I think And also passion, like everyone underlined, you should have the passion and that urge, which is a burning desire in you, which actually goads you towards what you want to do. So that urge should be there, that passion should be there, and the network should be there. If you inculcate these three, you can shift from anywhere to anywhere. But the fundamental thing is that fire. There are two more questions. I'll take it very quickly. The person who needs to change from being a marketing professional to a finance professional, what should he do? So Ajay and Abhi, any one of you, very quick.
I think first thing is obviously if you can invest in a finance professional course, something maybe even what Amrita Institute is offering or any other course that you feel first introduces a bit you to finance, you can always do that. We have also in the industry examples where marketing heads have gone on to become CFOs of organizations. It's about understanding risk more. It's about understanding high finance more. But I would encourage you to first maybe do one course in some form, maybe a 1-year course or any course that introduces you to the principles where you can understand whether you are truly interested in that in the long term before you make a deep dive. But you can. The answer is obviously you can. There's nothing to stop you, but you need to build the right skills.
Kacham actually asked another question is, am I thinking right when I switch after 3 years? I think this platform also offers you in some ways, we are there, we have been in finance for a long period of time. So if you want to reach out to us for any mentorship or any discussion, any one of you want to have, we are happy to do it. So Avik is there, Ajay is there, so if you want any guidance. Maybe this, because of the paucity of time, we need to close the discussion, but do feel free to talk to us. We are always ready to help. So Avik, is that, how can I connect? Yes, we will provide our emails to you. Is that okay with you, Avik and Ajay?
Yes, and Kacham, just quickly to answer you, I think it's a good thought. I mean, I think your ultimate objective is to start your own organization, your own business. You can always do a little bit of a stint in finance to understand finance more. Otherwise, it might all seem too difficult a subject from a distance. I think you're thinking in the right direction. But if your ultimate objective is to start your own business, and for that you want to get a deeper understanding of finance, that's always a good way to go.
Ajay, you want any quick thoughts? We'll close it. I think it's gonna freeze. So one of the questions is, can we get you on LinkedIn? Yes, we are available on LinkedIn, and that's very much possible. That's not a problem. So we are all there, so you can get us on LinkedIn. Amrita Lakshman, you want to say a few words, and then we can close the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. In fact, all these questions to the answers that you had given, the directions that we also propose is that they take the right financial electives during their undergraduation or post-graduation to get a better flavor of the finance world that they are going to, prospective finance world that they will engage. If he asks a question whether he's going in a healthy direction, of course, they would have to connect with academic partners like IIMA and then get to know more about the finance world, how it's changing now and then. It is an honor. It's an honor to have all of you here. It's a great pleasure. We thank all of you, Mr. Avik Sinha, Dr. Joydeep Nag, Ajay Jindalji, Indranil Chaudhary, and all the gathered here.
So thank you very much for joining in, and Abhi and Ajay, especially to you all, to both, for a very enlightening and very interesting session. The amount of chats which are coming up saying that wonderful session is too many, so it speaks about the volumes of the session. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.